Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. I wanted to give you just a brief introduction as to why I wrote the book Silent Moms. It took me almost 20 years to realize that I had issues that really needed to be addressed. Another 10 years to put together a bunch of information that I had collected, and another 10 years to put it into the form of a book. My sincerest hope is that with the use of the book or other groups or connections that you make, that your journey happens a lot faster. When I was in my mid-30s, that's when it sort of started to, little light bulbs were going off. I would get angry and just resentment would just surface, and I would lash out at whoever was closest to me. It could have been family or a complete stranger. Oh, some of the people that I just lashed out was unbelievable. And then other days I was just sad but couldn't tell you why. The problem was how I was dealing with that was just as unhealthy and sometimes even worse. So when I thought that drinking was the issue or possibly an eating disorder I'd had since teenager, then I went to an addiction support group. And it was great, it helped me to a certain point, but it still didn't get to the underlying issues of helping me really understand why I was doing what I was doing. I volunteered for an organization that helped women and men face unplanned pregnancies. And I thought, this is great. When I was pregnant back in, that would be early 80s, there wasn't a lot of varied support out there. I felt like I didn't have any other option other than adoption due to all the societal pressures and the influences at that time in my life. So I thought, great, I'll give them all the information that they need and they can make the choice that's best for them. Now, this volunteer role turned into a full-time position, and I ended up doing sex ed workshops in high schools, colleges, and youth groups. That was an interesting job. I actually loved it. Just the teenagers just very open and challenging about their sex lives. But again, when I was growing up, there was no sex ed class. And, most times no one ever even discussed it in the family because it was a taboo subject. So I was completely unprepared for what was going to happen to me and the decisions I needed to make and the things that I went through. So part of the requirement was, by volunteering and working at this nonprofit and them knowing my history, I needed to attend their birth mom support group. To me, made sense. If I'm going to do a peer counseling session with a new client who's facing an issue like an unplanned pregnancy, I need to make sure that I'm there for her and how I can help her and not make it all about me. So here I am about 20 years after the adoption of my son, and I'm sitting in the very first support group. I'm thinking, this is fine. I've got no issues. Life is good. I'm okay. Until the infamous words of the facilitator. All right, everyone, bring out your pictures. Being that my adoption was closed, my response was making a fist so tight it left nail marks in my hand. That was my aha moment. The in your face that you can no longer ignore moment. I've got a few notes because I'm sticking to a couple things I wanted to say to you. With that, many of you understand the analogy of an onion, and my situation was no different, peeling back layer upon layer, understanding what was really at the core. I came to understand my emotions a lot better. And it wasn't just a matter of saying, I am angry. I needed to define, okay, who am I angry at and why, and what am I going to do about it? A lot of times I wrote angry letters. I didn't mail them, which was probably really good, but just getting it out and better understanding the situation or what I had gone through was pivotal in my healing process. But when we talk about the onion and the core of it, that was my adoption experience. I had never been told to grieve. I was never given permission to grieve. I came from an era where it's like, you know, you did that, it's your own fault, move on, forget about it. But it just doesn't happen. And so I had never grieved. I had never tried to understand or just even learn from my losses and what I had gone through. So when I had learned more about myself, I realized that other people I encountered with similar adoption experience, and a lot of them were birth moms, that when they shared, their emotions were still very raw and real. I had come a little further in my journey, but I kept thinking, what can I do to help them along that journey? Because even some of the adoption agencies are focused on the adoptee and the child, and very little was done at the time for a birth mom. But my vision of helping others was again another in-your-face kind of moment. This picture is ingrained in my mind that I will never forget. I was speaking at a fundraising banquet and sharing about my adoption experience. As I looked around the room, there was a woman in the back corner, tears just streaming down her face, Kleenex box in front of her, and her eyes connected. And she touched me somewhere that, you know, you just don't expect it. So when I was done, I tried every attempt I could to make my way to her, but she was gone. I don't know her story. I don't know if she was a birth mom, if she was an adoptive parent, but it was because of her that I wrote the book. And I felt the urgency of getting that information out when there's people still hurting, and it's so apparent that there's still so many unaddressed issues out there. So many of you were at the first book launch, and this was the cover. When it came out, there was a part of me that just didn't really feel settled about the whole thing. The book was more about me and my story, and I decided, no, I will share my story, the tidbits of it, to help you understand where I'm coming from and how I chose to deal with some of these issues. But this is the second edition. And as you can see through here, there's not just text, but there's areas, there's reflection, there's exercises, there's journaling. There's even a separate journal you can purchase just to keep track of all your notes, so you can go back and read through them and just realize how far you have come from when you started your journey. I'm going to be doing videos on a regular basis. I might pick a topic out of the book, I might pick an exercise and just share from what my experience was going through that. And I welcome any comments, any feedback, because this is also about your journey. I want to be able to provide you with as much information that will help you along your own healing journey. So please stay in touch. That's one way for us to get this out in the open, to talk more, to communicate, to connect. And thank you for connecting today. And I look forward to seeing you again.